Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Thanksgiving themed presentation. So we've titled this one, Build a Better Thanksgiving Plate, some healthy swaps and smart portions, to talk about some ways that maybe we can look at portioning our plate in some familiar but maybe novel ways for you, as well as discussing some protein adding swaps or some other changes that you might be able to make if you're the one doing some of the cooking. And if you're new here, I'm Laura Goldman. I'm a registered dietitian, and it's my pleasure to do these presentations for Premier Weight Loss. I hope you find this informative, and let's get started. As I like to say every week, remember it's the quality of your calories that matters. When it comes to Thanksgiving meals or treating ourselves, it's still fine to treat yourself, but ultimately, in the broad scope of things, it's always nice to be picking the high quality calories that you know are going to benefit you and help you reach your goals. This evening, we'll be covering broadly the following. Generally, how to build a satisfying and balanced Thanksgiving plate. I'll also talk about those ingredient swaps you can make, which if you're going to be cooking some of the food, this is going to be potentially helpful for you. I also touch on portion sizing, some visual examples. They'll probably sound very familiar, but some visual examples you can use and how you would apply that to some of the Thanksgiving foods. And one of my new favorite additions is giving you a few goals for the week. So some things that you can implement within the next week and see how that works for you. As always, I leave time for your questions at the end, so please don't hesitate to reach out. First, we'll touch on the GLP-1 medications, which you're likely taking, and some of the advantages, especially when it comes to approaching a Thanksgiving meal, is that you feel fuller sooner and for a longer period of time. You may have noticed in the previous slide that example of a Thanksgiving plate on a GLP-1 medication, and it looked somewhat pitiful in a way, and hopefully we can find a way to make it not look quite like that. But as you know, you will feel fuller sooner and longer, and you will naturally be eating less, which again, this is an advantage because it makes you less likely to feel like you've overeaten or overdone it in any particular food group or dessert. However, I think it's important to remember and keep in mind that because you feel fuller sooner, it's potentially very easy to fill up on those less nutrient-dense foods. Pumpkin pie is really appealing to me, and I could see that being a main draw and then not feeling hungry for any other food. Also, there is the potential, even though you may naturally eat less and not feel quite as hungry because of the holiday and because of the way that oftentimes we all like to fill up our plate on Thanksgiving, there is the potential for accidentally overeating and leading to quite a bit of discomfort. And we can certainly want to avoid that if at all possible. So one of the first topics is talking about sort of the balancing your plate, a general visual guide to eat what some people might call the plate method. And to start out, it's going to look quite familiar as you've probably seen this before, but ideally 50% would be the non-starchy vegetables. And so I list them to the left here. The non-starchy vegetables, especially when it comes to potential Thanksgiving options, would be green beans, Brussels sprouts, roasted broccoli, cauliflower, etc., etc. And I would say green bean casserole, in case that pops into mind. Yes, it is part of the non-starchy veggie. There also is some decent amount of fats in there and potentially some of those fried onions on top. But it can still count as your veggie, as part of your veggies. About 25% or a quarter of your plate should be coming from protein. So some examples that you might have would be turkey, of course, or small amounts of ham, or any other lean protein that maybe you choose for Thanksgiving. Finally, the starches would be the other quarter of your plate. And we're talking about foods like your sweet potatoes, stuffing, dinner rolls, or corn. Of course, sweet potatoes would have a little more nutritional value than, say, dinner rolls, but they all essentially count under the starch category. Then desserts and treats, that does get a mention, of course, because desserts and treats are usually expected for a Thanksgiving meal, and I wanted to make sure that was included. So you would want to have small amounts of that, of whatever your favorite is. So try and save that for after the meal, or even wait 20 minutes and have it then. Or if you need, and if you can, pack it and save it for later. Also, there's an order that I recommend most people follow when it's the plate method. You want, again, pick those high quality calories first, and most of the high quality calories will be coming from your protein and veggies sections. So these would be your first stops, followed by the starches, and then followed by dessert. And again, as I have here, fats is in the middle, mainly because I know there will be fats involved in creating many of these dishes, and small amounts of fats are healthy, and you do want to make sure that those do get included. Now, if you're cooking at home, or if you're responsible for some of the meals, and everyone's agreeable, because I do understand you do want people to enjoy your foods as well, there are a few smart swaps that you can make that, and I'm sure I haven't listed all that are out there, but here are a few that have come to mind. So if you're looking for a protein and fiber boost for baked or mashed potatoes, a very easy substitute that many people probably have done before they started on GLP-1 medications, or some people have done all their lives, adding some plain Greek yogurt to substitute for sour cream. Greek yogurt and sour cream are deceivingly similar in flavor, and so it's a very easy protein change up. In terms of green bean casserole, adding extra beans will help change that ratio of the liquid to the beans. And maybe you can even mix some Greek yogurt into the sauce. That will add a little bit of acidity to just a little more sharp, and definitely worth giving a little test ahead of time to make sure it's agreeable to you and to anybody else. And if you're making your own stuffing, if you have whole wheat bread available, that would be a great addition to increase that fiber content. And for protein, if you have some diced turkey, or if you have some chicken sausage, you can add that in for a little protein boost and a flavor boost, especially in the case of the chicken sausage. If you're looking more into reducing calories, when it comes to sweet potatoes, avoiding the marshmallows and cutting back on the brown sugar would be a very huge benefit. Instead, think of spices. You know, sweet potatoes are already sweet, so add cinnamon or nutmeg, or even coriander. In fact, ground coriander on sweet potato slices was the first time I ever actually enjoyed a sweet potato. So that might be a way to open up your palate even. In terms of gravy, and this one I had to look around for because I wanted to make sure there was a recipe that would be reasonable. Instead of using that fat and flour and broth combination, you can create with a broth and cornstarch plus flavorings. So I found an example that seemed fairly quick and easy, and it was on food.com. So I have actually that example listed here on the right side of the screen, where it talks about making a no-fat gravy. So you're using broth and also some mushroom stems and pieces. There's the flavorings here you have, and the instant potato flakes will add that thickening element that you would want for a gravy. And this was very, very interesting to me because it was so simple and easy to make, and the reviews on it sounded absolutely fantastic. So worth a try. And finally, some other healthy choices. If you use white rice in any of your dishes, wild rice, while it's technically a grass, not a rice, and it definitely has a stronger flavor, it would be a very healthy switch. Or if you have a cheese and cracker plate, also look into having hummus and veggies as an option. Moving on talking about portions in a different way, I wanted to talk about those visual, practical portioning ideas. So, for example, with turkey, or really any lean protein, the idea is to have about 3 to 4 ounces at a meal. Now, you may want less than that if you feel fuller much faster, but 3 to 4 ounces is sort of an area that you can at least visualize and know you're not necessarily overdoing it. And so an idea would be a deck of cards. That's a decent example of 3 to 4 ounces. If it comes to starches or potatoes, stuffing, for example, it's recommended to try and not go over half a cup, and a half a cup visually is about the size of a tennis ball. I know some of these visual examples people will use hands, but I think people's hands can vary so much in size. I wanted to use a few more static types of measurement tools here. Veggies, in general, you have unlimited amounts that you're allowed to have, certainly, but I do know that it is easy to fill up again, so just be mindful of that. But a general recommendation would be 1 to 2 cups. A baseball is about the size of 1 cup. And again, I know that might be a much for your plate, but again, this is just something to think about visually. For pie and desserts, when we're talking about GLP-1 medications, I couldn't think of a decent visual example, but try to think of just doing small slices at a time, or if it's a standard size slice, so if a pie is cut up into 8 pieces, you could either cut that piece in half or share with a friend or share with somebody to try and keep that portion under control. Some other success strategies that you could implement if none of the previous are all that helpful. One, I would suggest using a salad plate instead of a dinner plate if that option is available. It seems that dinner plates keep getting bigger and bigger as the decades go on, and so a salad plate is actually, at least I know that my the salad plates that I have are about the same size as the dinner plates that my parents have, and so you can get a more reasonable size plate if you try to make that switch, which will then naturally make your portions go smaller. Also remember to choose some of those top picks. If you have certain favorites, even if they go and fall under the starch categories, allow yourself to enjoy more of those. Maybe that will be taking over that one particular starch. Maybe you have a favorite casserole or stuffing. If that's going to take up the entire quarter of the plate, that's okay. You should allow yourself to enjoy what you've been most looking forward to. Also, unrelated to food, try to focus on the conversation with others. If you are talking and conversing, that's distracting from the act of eating, and it also has a chance to slow everything down, so you have a chance to digest and feel what level of fullness you're at. With that in mind, don't forget to stop before you feel stuffed. If you feel stuffed, it's already going to be too late, and you'll most likely start to feel very uncomfortable. And at the very end, wait about 20 minutes before getting up for any seconds or for dessert. And just in case somebody has a classic dish that runs out very easily, if you're worried they'll be out of your favorite before that wait period is over, pack it up and save it for later. You can have something to look forward to later in the evening or maybe even the next day. Now that I've talked over a bunch of those strategies, I wanted to suggest some goals for the week. So for the next week, try to pick one or more of the following and see how it works for you. Firstly, if you haven't used that plate method, try and get comfortable with that so you can see how that looks on your plate and you know how to build from there. Try to aim on filling your plate with that outline that I provided earlier, and focus on eating those protein and vegetables first, and then following with the starches. And see how your body feels as you eat through that plate. Also, since we talked about recipe swaps or protein changes, I would highly suggest testing it now, buying the ingredients and putting it together so that way you know if it's going to be successful when it's time for the big day. Also, what I find very interesting is try and test your portion awareness. So we were talking about eyeballing and using some visual examples, but truthfully, most people, those visual examples are helpful, but most people, professionals included, we tend to visualize incorrectly. And so try and eyeball for yourself what a half a cup is or 3 ounces, and then test that against maybe a scale, a food scale, or some measuring cups that you have, and see how close you are to hitting that target. It might be a little bit revealing. And finally, again, not food related, but I think very important, try to think of talking points. If you have a good story that you want to come up, that you have in your life that you want to share with others, or if you have some questions that you want to make sure to ask, if you can emphasize that conversation with others and being together, again, then the focus won't necessarily be on finishing a plate or eating. Also, I touched on food pushers, or people who try to convince you to eat more when you might already feel full. And this is a good area to focus on as well, because this is a chance to change the subject or not feel like you're getting pushed into eating more if everyone's continuing to talk and have items to talk about. So to wrap this all up and to put it together, just remember you can still enjoy Thanksgiving and other holidays while still meeting your health goals and working toward those goals. Try to balance your plate as much as possible, but leave room for favorites. And remember that some small swaps can make a big difference in the overall quality of your calories. However, we're all human, and remember that if you feel like you didn't pull off the perfect Thanksgiving or the healthiest Thanksgiving, just remember that one day is not going to undo all the hard work you've put in so far. So feel free to enjoy the day regardless, and don't stress over one day necessarily. And with that, I want to leave this open to questions if you have any. All right. Well, I think that does it for this evening. I hope you found this informative and maybe gave you a few ideas that you hadn't thought of before. Please, if you have any questions that come up later or would like some other tips, reach out to the Premier Weight Loss team or myself. We'll be all happy to help you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. And I'll see you at the next one. Bye.